the 9.5-hour film Shoah that was released in 1985. Rosenbaum said, for Lanzmann, the attempt to explain Hitler is not merely futile but immoral. He calls the very enterprise of understanding obscene. There are some pictures, and this is Lanzmann speaking, of Hitler as a baby too, aren't there? He said. There's even a book written about Hitler's childhood, an attempt at explanation, which is for me obscenity as such. Rosenbaum then said, one can sense why Lanzmann finds the impressionable plasticity of the baby pictures of a fatally alluring invitation, the deceptive and dangerous promise of understanding. I'm wondering, do you see any correlations between Lanzmann's characterization of Hitler explainers with those who address the question why, which is the question that's always repeated about the Holocaust, as obscene to the modern state of Israel's assertion that many of its critics are anti-Semitic?
Look, this is just nonsense. It's just meaningless and drivel. Plasticity of pictures. What do these terms mean? They're completely empty-headed. It's obscene to try to understand. Now, I understand that the documentary he produced was quite good. My parents liked it. I never watched it. But why is it obscene to try to understand why a phenomenon happened? Do you want to worship at it? Do you want to explain it? Or do you want to understand it in order to avert its repetition? To say you don't, trying to understand it is obscene. I'm afraid to say this is typical French intellectual drivel. And then these expressions, obscene as such. What does as such mean? It's just this pretentious twaddle. I don't know why people even pay attention to this. It's pseudo-profundity. Would you say of any other crime in history it's obscene to try to understand it? Oh, it's okay to try to understand Genghis Khan and Joseph Stalin, but it's obscene to try to understand Hitler. Why?
Do you think that attempt to characterize understanding as obscene has influenced the perception of criticisms of Israel today? For example, in Thomas Friedman's book,
because the whole purpose of this is to put the Nazi Holocaust in a category all its own. Everything else is understandable. The Nazi Holocaust is not understandable. Everything else we should try to rationally comprehend. The Nazi Holocaust, it's obscene to try to comprehend it. It's all designed to prove the uniqueness of the Nazi Holocaust, and therefore the uniqueness of Jewish suffering, and therefore to exempt Jews in Israel from ordinary moral standards. It's a shakedown. It's moral extortion.
At the beginning of the presentation this evening, there was this statement that you grew up in a home that was hostile to war. I'd like to ask you a question about your parents, if that's okay. You're the son of two Holocaust survivors. Correct me if I'm incorrect, they were both in the Warsaw Ghetto. And your father survived Auschwitz and your mother Majdanek. Sorry, I didn't pronounce it correctly. How do you think they would see your perspectives of the Holocaust? Would they agree?
My parents lived until 1995, and I was already quite active politically on this issue since the very early 1980s, and there were no major disagreements. There probably would have been disagreements had they lived. Regarding my views of the Germans, I'm not prepared to categorize any group of people as being evil. And my parents, there was no love lost between them and the Germans or them and the Polish people. We probably would have disagreed, and probably would have disagreed strongly on that issue.
All right. Well, Anyone else have a question? That's all the questions I have.
Okay, that sounds fine.
It was a pleasure to speak with you, and it was also a pleasure to hear your lecture this evening.
Well, thank you.